What's good, YouTube? This is Boxingwave, and we are back with the Wave Report number 27. Today, we're just going to go over the weekend's fights. There was a fight on the Zone with Katie Taylor and Chantel Cameron, and there was also the David Benavidez Demetrius Andrade card on Showtime pay-per-view. Shout out to all the people that subscribe to the channel, all the new subscribers. Shout out to everyone that's donated and, just supported the channel in any way. All right, and shout out to all the people that was here on Saturday night when I covered the Showtime pay-per-view card. All right, wasn't able to cover the Katie Taylor Chantel Cameron card, but I was able to watch the entire fight this morning. All right, so that's where exactly we're gonna start with the Taylor Cameron rematch, right? Which was an undisputed fight at 140. Okay, this was a rematch for a fight that they had earlier where Chantel won the first fight. In my opinion, I think she won the first fight around 6 rounds to 4. I was supposed to do a breakdown. I did rewatch the fight maybe like a day or two before the rematch, but just didn't have time to do any content on it. But to be honest, I'm going to be honest with you, I actually thought Chantel was going to win the fight. So even though I didn't do a breakdown, I would have probably picked Chantel to win the fight just because she was a bigger fighter. I thought she was going to just outwork Katie, try to bully Katie again. And a lot of it was based on the age of Katie, her moving up in the extra weight and, her age, getting closer and closer to 40. I felt like this is a dangerous fight to have against a bigger, younger fighter. Overall, I thought Katie was the better talent between the two. But I just thought that in order for Chantel to win, she would just need to repeat what she did, but just apply more pressure. And I was way wrong with that because even with the pressure, Katie just boxed so much better in this fight. And what I will say is, let me just start with the actual scorecard that I posted. I guess I really don't have to pull it up because Barry Jones' unofficial scorecard matched mine. Okay, I don't know who he gave the 10th to, but I basically gave Chantel 3 of the 7 rounds, right? So, the first round though, I only scored it differently because I gave Chantel Cameron the knockdown. Okay, she won the first round with the knockdown. Now, I've seen people on Twitter saying that she tripped up over the feet or whatever. I watched it in slow-mo and the 2 angles that they showed it on the Zone, and there was no tripping of the feet, and she didn't step on her feet or anything. The feet didn't even touch each other. You just got to watch it really slowly. Just be careful of the still images that people put on social media. You know what I mean? Because it can make it look like the foot is being stepped on. It wasn't stepped on. They both were trading jabs. Chantel got her jab off first. It landed first. And even though Katie fell in an awkward way, it was a flash knockdown. She wasn't hurt by it. It was just the timing of Chantel's jab was perfect and caught her right on the chin, and she went down. Again, she wasn't hurt by it, but it was a flash knockdown. It should have been counted as a knockdown because she didn't step on her foot. And just to make things clear, even though I do think Katie still won, even scoring the knockdown, she still won on my card. I just don't like the commentary. I think the commentary is just too biased. I said this the other day before I watched the entire fight. Just a little bit that I was listening to. The commentary is just too blatantly biased. All right, we all love Katie. We want her to win. I know I wanted her to win. Nothing against Chantel. I have no issue with Chantel. I think she's a very good boxer. I still think she's a pound for pound fighter. I thought she was a pound for pound fighter as far as the females before the first Katie Taylor fight. You know what I mean? She can box very well. I didn't think there was that much of a gap between the two of them when it comes to overall talent. But, I'm rooting for Katie Taylor. She is the famous boxer. They're fighting in Dublin, in Ireland. You know what I mean? The crowd is there to support her. But just like the first fight, we know she's a star. But we can't just sit here and dismiss everything that Chantel is doing. And that was my issue with the first and the second fight. You can't just dismiss her for just making it seem like she's not doing anything in the fight. I don't like that. You still got to be fair. You still got to, like, we could all have our biases. We could all want someone to win. And that's cool. But you got to be professional if you're going to be giving commentary. You're not going to be up there and just rooting for the fighter that everybody wants to win, because, again, like I said the other day, you're going to have influence on the viewers, the people that are sitting home watching the fight, the people that are not in the arena. I mean, the arena is going to influence you too, because anytime Katie lands a punch or throws anything, the crowd is going to cheer for her. All right. But you already have that influence on what you're seeing. But if the commentators and people believe that these guys are the professionals, and they're giving like scorecards and all of this stuff, you have to be fair. It doesn't matter who you want to win. I didn't like that. I haven't liked it. And to be honest, Katie doesn't really need it, because she won the fight to me. She won it. It was close. It was competitive. It was a better fight than the first one. But she doesn't need the super biased commentary. You know what I mean? I don't think it's necessary. Especially in this case, it wasn't really needed. I thought the fight was competitive, but I thought Katie pretty much clearly won, especially because the first round wasn't officially scored a knockdown round. It wasn't a 10-8 round for Cameron. All right, but as far as the fight, like I said earlier, Cameron was more aggressive, but I think she lacked boxing. I think because she won the fight, I think she probably went into this fight, and I don't know, but she might have went into this fight wanting to score or score a knockdown or get a win by knockout. You know what I mean? I think she abandoned her tactics and was just trying to be the brute and be the aggressor. She was the aggressive in the first fight, but outside of the jab, she couldn't land the power shots. She just couldn't. Outside of a few rounds, I think it was, I don't know if it was the fourth or the fifth round, maybe. All right, maybe it was the fifth round, where I think, even though I gave that round to Taylor, I think the momentum started to change around halfway through the fight, because Cameron was closing the gap and being physical on the inside. I think that really worked out for her in certain rounds. But on the outside, Katie was outboxing her. And what I would have said in the breakdown, if I had did one, what Katie needed to do was counter more. Her punch output was so low in the first fight. I remember when I watched it the other day, I remember Katie slipping and dodging and getting underneath a lot of shots. But she wasn't countering that much as opposed to this one. This one here, she moved better. She didn't stay on the ropes longer. And she would catch Cameron as she was coming straight in. So I thought she did a better job. Even putting her punches together, she did everything better here. You know what I mean? I think the one issue that Katie has, and she had this issue in other fights before, she kind of falls into a trap in fighting her opponent's fights. Like, she can be outboxing Chantel or McCaskill or even Serrano, right? Serrano, we saw it big in a Serrano fight where she gets caught in this trap and going to war and trading, with the bigger or the harder puncher. And that's how she ends up getting caught. And even in this fight, even though I thought she won the fight, if you look at the 8th round of this fight, Chantel dominated her in that round because Katie stayed in the pocket with her. Chantel was being extremely physical, not with just the punches, but just wearing her down with her body, the bumping, the shoulders and everything. Katie was leaning on her, trying to hold her ground. And I think Katie probably felt that she was up And she took, if you look at most of the damage that Katie had on her face, it was from that eighth round. All the swelling you saw at the end, her face was fine leading up and going into the seventh round, seventh or the eighth round. But if you look at her before those rounds, she was fine. If you look at her after those rounds, her face was swollen because she took too many power shots from Chantel by trying to have a phone booth fight with her. And I think the last two rounds were close. I'm sure some people gave to Chantel because she was the more aggressive fighter. But again, Katie went back to boxing and using, having that distance. And she was outboxing Chantel. I just gave Katie the last two simply because Katie was being extremely strategic. She was hitting, and then holding. Where Chantel was just, all her offense was smothered in those last two rounds. So even though Chantel was trying to be aggressive still, like she was in the eighth round, she didn't land as many or close to the amount of punches she landed in the eighth round. The eighth round was very, very good round and probably the most dominant round in the entire fight from both. But Katie was definitely the most consistent. I gave Chantel, mine's matched Barry Jones's unofficial card, and it was a good fight. Katie did well. Chantel just didn't do good boxing that well. Her jab was on point. One thing about Chantel, maybe it was the fourth round, Chantel landed a really good body shot. I think it was a backhand, right hand shot to the body. And she didn't do enough of that. I think she relied on her jab to try to get in, but she was just missing with the power shots. Most of the hooks, most of the big right hands from her just didn't land. Katie did a good job defensively and the counters and some of the short shots and the short counters that Katie landed on the inside just was too much. Chantel was just walking into everything. Another thing is the headbutts. It was a lot of headbutts. I mean, Chantel got split open because of a headbutt, but the head clashes, I mean, even the ones that didn't count, that wasn't brought up by the ref or the commentary, it was just a lot of them. They kind of just both leaned in with their heads often, both of them. It was nobody at fault. They both were doing it. But overall, it was a great fight. Definitely one of the better female fights. Yeah, there was times it was kind of rock'em sock'em. You know what I mean? They would just throw flurries at each other, but for the most part, it was a good fight. And at this point, is what is Katie gonna do? I think the right thing to do is give Chantel a third fight simply because Chantel won the first one. They ran it back in Ireland, and I think the right thing to do is give her a third shot. Of course, I would love to see Amanda Serrano rematch. I've been wanting to see that. I think Amanda turned it down originally. I would love to see Alicia Baumgartner, if she's really cleared with all this. I know she came out and made a statement recently, but if she is officially cleared, I would love to see Alicia Baumgartner fight one of them, you know what I mean? Whether it's Amanda or Katie. But to be honest, if I was her, or maybe Amanda, I would probably really retire. I mean, she really doesn't have anything to prove. This is gonna be her second undisputed. She's a 2-division undisputed champ. I'm talking about Katie Taylor. You know what I mean? She's 37 years old. She really doesn't have anything to prove. She can retire right now. You know what I mean? I think it's fair to give Chantel another opportunity. But overall, I just think that she can just retire. She has nothing else to prove. She has nothing else to prove to Amanda Serrano. She has nothing else to prove to Alicia Baumgartner. She can just retire, in my opinion. You know what I mean? She's going to go down as being the top one or two greatest female boxers of all time. She obviously is going to be a Hall of Famer. And I just think that at this point, she and Clarissa and Amanda, and they really set the standard for the female boxing. You know what I mean? They really did a great job. I got to give a credit to Matchroom as well and Eddie, because DAZN is really putting on a lot for the females. You know what I'm saying? The females fight elsewhere, but DAZN really stepped it up for them. You know what I mean? Gave them main events, gave them full cards and stuff like that, and put them on a map where as everybody's viewing it. You know what I mean? So Katie really doesn't have anything to prove at this point, but she could just retire. You know what I mean? And that'll be that, and people would respect it. You know what I mean? So that's my thoughts on that. All right. All right. So let's start out with let's go to the David Benavidez Demetrius Andrade card. All right. There's a few fights that I'm going to start out with Sergey Lipinets. He fought Michel Rivera. Now Michel Rivera had lost to Frank Martin at 135. All right. That was both of their tests. Let me just drink some water. Both of them stepped up, fought each other. Both were undefeated. Southpaw against righty. And Frank did his thing. You know, Frank. He pretty much dominated him. You know, he won at least 9 of those rounds. You know what I mean? You know, and I think he even dropped Michel Rivera. Now, Rivera had tested positive for some sort of PED. And I think he had some sort of suspension. And now this was his first fight back, and he fought at 140 against, a former champion at 140. All right. And a guy that I respect, Sergey Lipinets is very tough fighter. You know what I mean? He retired Lamont Peterson. He went to war with Boots Ennis. Ennis destroyed him, but he took a lot of punishment, a lot more punishment than anybody else that Boots had faced. Sergey Lipinets is a tough fighter, durable fighter. I respect him, and I honestly didn't know who would win this, but I thought it was a tough, risky fight for a guy coming off his first loss. And a loss that he was pretty much dominated, by Frank Martin. But, Michel Rivera, when I saw him at the weigh-in against Lipinets, I thought he looked huge. I thought he looks like he belongs at 140. He looked much bigger than Lipinets. And I know even though he wasn't really the aggressor in the fight with Lipinets, I like how smooth he looked. He looked healthy. He looked strong. He looked durable. I think he also had good stamina. I think in the last few rounds he kind of faded some of those rounds a little bit, but I liked Michel Rivera in this fight, man. The movement, controlling range, did a very, very good job. I mean, it had to make me go back and watch a little bit of the Frank Martin fight just to compare, because I was like, man, he's, I've seen the kid fight for a good amount of fights, before the Frank Martin fight. I had to at least see him like 4 or 5 times. And to be honest, I mean, he looked phenomenal against Sergey Lipinets. And I loved it. I think he put on a show, and I think he did his thing. And I think he looked more impressive than he did against Frank. Frank, totally different style. Frank, very patient, southpaw fighter. You know what I mean? It was different. It was a technical fight where Michel got outboxed. But here, Sergey, man, he looked slow. He was his punches, man. He was just slow and very, very predictable. You know what I mean? He was loading up on everything. It wasn't a good showing for Sergey. You know what I mean? I don't know what it means. It might really not mean anything. I think he was trying to overcommit. You know what I mean? And it showed. I think he was trying to beat a bully to the smaller guy, and it showed. It didn't work out for him. You know what I mean? He didn't set up the punches was coming straight forward. I thought he didn't do bad at cutting off the ring, but he was just his punches was just so slow, man, and he was putting power down and everything, and you saw it. You know what I mean? You saw it, and just wasn't good showing. Rivera was able to step around him at that all fight long and use his jab and his legs and his counters and his combinations, and was just beat him to the punch all night long. You know what I mean? I think Lipinets was just overcommitting, and I think he needed to be faster. You know what I mean? He was telegraphing his punches throughout the whole fight, and I think that's what made it kind of easy for Michel Rivera. I don't know what this means. I don't know what this means. I was trying to think, Subriel Matias, who I'm going to speak on shortly, was on the same card, defending his IBF title. And I don't think there's many people there in the division that can beat him right now. I'm talking about Matias. But I know that, depending on, I don't know what Michel Rivera's situation is as far as promotions. I don't know if he has to stay with the PBC. I don't know where he goes from here. But I wouldn't want him to fight Subriel Matias. But it wouldn't be a bad fight, and it's a realistic fight. When I'm thinking of who's over there with the PBC or with the Showtime fighters, whether they're PBC or Showtime or whatever. There's Brandon Lee over there. There's Antoine Russell. There's some fighters over there that's at 140, and some matches I could see getting made. You know what I mean? But Michel Rivera is definitely someone that we should look out for at 140. To me, he officially looks better at 140. He looks stronger. He looked bigger. And I think he looked fast. I love the way he moved, and good fight. Good fight. All right, so let's move on to the main pay-per-view card. We're gonna start out with Lamont Roach Jr. All right, and Hector Luis Garcia. All right, Lamont Roach Jr. beats Hector Luis Garcia. All right, wins the title. What title was on the line? The WBA wins the title. All right, at 130. Shout out to Lamont Roach Jr. He's been around for a long time, man. He put on a good performance. I'm glad he won the title. This was his second opportunity. He lost to Jamel Herring a few years back. And, he fought against Hector Garcia, a guy that I respect. Hector is a good fighter. Coming off against the loss against Tank Davis. Lost to Tank, but the fight was up at 135. So no title was on the line for Garcia. All right, comes back down, defends his title. And the one thing that I said on the broadcast of the fight is that I saw the weigh-in the night before, and I didn't like the way Hector looked at the weigh-in. And he's not the most chiseled fighter, but, I keep my eye on guys and how they look at the weigh-ins. And compare them on how they look in other weigh-ins. You know what I mean? Sometimes, obviously, when a fighter goes up, he doesn't look as chiseled and stuff like that. But when, Hector, even though he's not the most chiseled looking fighter, when I saw the Tank weigh-in, when I saw the Chris Colbert weigh-in, I just thought Hector was in better shape, in my opinion. You know what I mean? It's just, I didn't think he looked terrible at the weigh-in. But I saw his stomach. It just didn't look like he trained at his best for this fight. Maybe underestimated Lamont Roach. He did beat Chris Colbert. He had a good fight against Tank until he was stopped. And maybe the dude was just feeling himself, or maybe the opposite. Maybe he, lost a little bit of drive by having that loss. You know what I mean? But Lamont Roach looked phenomenal at the weigh-in, and he's always been a tough fighter, and he showed up, man. He's tough, he's durable, never really had the biggest pop, but he showed up for this one, man. And I would say that, if you guys were here, I thought the fight was very close the first 6 rounds or so. First 6 to 7 rounds, I thought the fight was close. I thought Hector had the bigger counters, all right, but Lamont was more active and he was just more consistent, more higher punch output, and he had some good counters as well. Hector is not the best at moving his head. I've said this before in previous breakdowns, and Lamont won, man. The second round, second half of the fight, he took over, and then he went like a period where he won like 4 or 5 rounds in a row before the end of the fight. And he was able to hurt Hector, almost stopping him in that 11th round and even the 12th round. You know what I mean? I think he did drop him too. So Lamont Roach went straight for that title, like hard fight, and that's what you got to do. I love the performance from him, and I felt like Hector just kept fading as long the fight went. He faded. I want to say maybe around the 8th, 9th round. He didn't even have that pop anymore in his counters, and he relied too much on the counters. He didn't initiate. He wasn't coming forward like the way he did against Colbert. He just didn't seem motivated, But I don't want to take anything from Lamont. Lamont was a better fighter, you know what I mean? From the counters to the exchanges, just overall the consistency, you know what I mean? Lamont slowed down at times, but he picked it up. And I remember while I was giving commentary, I was saying Lamont always started every round very fast, but Hector would steal some of the rounds because he would land some big counters, in the second or third minute of each round. And I think Lamont overall was more consistent, but in the second half, Lamont it wasn't even competitive no more. You know what I mean? Lamont was just better, and Hector was fading. So congratulations to him. Like I said in the previous videos that I've done on O'Shaquie Foster, and all of these champions had fights recently at 130. O'Shaquie just won his fight. Joe Cordina just won his. Mario Navarrete just had a draw. So those are the champs. O'Shaquie is now top ranked. All right. So he had a fight a week or two before Navarrete did, and so did Cordina. What I believe is going to happen is, because I'm basically talking about unification, what I believe is going to happen is Cordina is going to fight Lee Wood over there on Matchroom. Lee Wood's going to go up to 130. He beat Mauricio Lara in the second fight, beat Josh Warrington, stopped him. He's going to go up and fight Joe Cordina. So there are going to be no unifications there. I don't believe that Navarrete is going to be rematching Conceição. All right. I think there's a strong possibility that Navarrete might just go straight up to 135 right now. I hope not. You know what I mean? I don't really want him to. I know people want the Shakur fight. I kind of want to see what Navarrete can do at 130. You know what I mean? But the bigger names are at 135, so I could kind of understand him going up to 135. But after that showing, and I'm not trying to take anything away from Conceição, because that guy was a warrior, showed a crazy amount of heart, durability in that fight. I can see, I would just like Navarrete to have some more fights at 130. You know what I mean? I think the fights at 130 are still very competitive for him. Lamont Roach would be a good fight. O'Shaquie Foster, who's there, that is the most likely fight to happen if he stays at 130, since they're both at top rank. But I would just like to get unification. You know what I mean? 130 is not a flooded division right now. You know what I mean? A lot of guys hadn't already moved up to 125. If somebody can get, Oscar Valdez, I don't know what Oscar's doing right now, but it's not a deep division right now. It really isn't. Outside of the champions and contenders, it's really not much going on there in the division. It's like, it's 130 right now is kind of the pit stop before going to the major leagues at 135. You know what I mean? That's how I see it. You got Conceição there. You got Jamel Herring made his return, so he's back. You got Rakhimov is still there. He's tough. There's some tough fighters there, but no fights that people are dying to see right now. You know what I mean? Maybe some one of them can get Oscar Valdez in there. But again, a lot of guys are with top rank at 130. You know what I mean? So we'll see. We'll see. All right, but and the same for Hector. Hector got to get the motivation back. I don't know why he looked poor. He looked poor. He didn't look like he trained that well. Just my opinion. All right, let's move on to the next fight. Let's talk Sabrio Matias. Let me get this card back up. Yeah, Sabrio Matias against Ergashev. Man, I didn't know. I didn't watch Ergashev fight before this fight. Didn't get around to seeing him, but I saw everyone was talking about this fight and how tough this was going to be for Matias. You know what I mean? From what I saw in the highlights, I thought Ergashev was just a little bit more intense than Ponce. Ponce was a undefeated fighter too, had knockout power and stuff. But Ergashev seemed to be much more powerful to me. All right, but Sabrio Matias came with a game plan that I thought Team Ergashev was going to understand. Matias going in there with a puncher, just be defensive. Try to close a gap, seeing if you can get the range. Feel the power. Get the timing down. Sabrio Matias is not just a rock'em sock'em robot, just not your typical pressure fighter. You know what I mean? There's a science to what he does, and you saw it. And he's getting better. Yes, defensively he's not great, but he's getting better at putting on pressure without getting hit as much clean. Coming in with the high guard, moving his upper body a lot more than he used to. Changing levels, getting low, shifting the head, going side to side. And parrying shots, and he's not taking the bulk of everything clean. You know what I mean? I thought Ergashev in the first round did land some left hands through the guard of Matias. All right, but it wasn't enough. Ergashev unloaded too soon, too early, and it showed his inexperience. But I thought that, the guy was really limited. Very explosive, very good puncher, very fast hands, but limited as a fighter. You know what I mean? And didn't know how to control distance at all. Very flat-footed. Couldn't fight going backwards. Didn't move his head ever. Ergashev didn't move his head ever. So when Matias started to let his hands go in the end of the second round and after, he was landing everything he was throwing. He wasn't sitting down on the punches, but he was keeping the volume very high. You know what I mean? And Ergashev didn't have no answer. And, it didn't take long. Maybe some point in the third round where you saw the pop and the, it just didn't look the same. Just like I was saying with Hector Garcia. The explosiveness in those punches didn't have that same. It didn't have that same look, the same feel. You know what I mean? And just at that point, I was like, I called it earlier. I was like, oh, it's over for this guy already. It's over. Because once you lose your power and speed, and that's all you have, it's over. You don't know how to control distance. He couldn't get himself off the ropes in the corners. He didn't know how to fight going backwards, and he had no defense. He didn't know how to get away out of the way of the shots, and it was over. Ergashev, very, very. He, what he reminds me of a little bit. And I don't even think he's as good as this other guy, but he reminds me of Ivan Baranchyk a little bit. You know what I mean? Like Ivan Baranchyk, very strong, powerful, fast. Didn't have the great defense though, and once he fought a puncher that was able to outbox him and match his power, everybody started knocking him out. You know what I mean? Ergashev is just a guy that very explosive when he was coming up. Because I only seen his highlights, but you can tell that the quality of the opponents weren't that good, and yes, he looked phenomenal. He looks very dangerous, but Matias is a real deal pressure fighter. I mean, real deal pressure fighter. You know what I mean? And if you're unloading everything you got early and you don't know how to use range, you don't know how to control distance with that lead hand, you don't have the defense to slip and move out of way a shot and step around Matias, if you don't have that, but you have power and speed and nothing else, you're not going to last, because you gave everything you had within the first couple of rounds. And it was over after that. Matias is a real deal. My question is, I do believe that he beats most of the best fighters in this division right now. I do believe that. I still do believe that he's improving with every fight. He already avenged his first and only loss. I think right now though, when I look at the division, let me go to the division real quick. Let me just pull up BoxRec real quick. So when I look at the division, I look at everyone's there. I think he has a chance against everyone. Okay? I don't think he beats all of these guys, but I think he has a good chance of beating all of these guys. And I'm going from the very top of Teofimo Lopez all the way down to the top 20. I think he has a good chance of beating all of these guys. All of them. Because of his pressure. Think is, though, some of these fighters like a Teofimo Lopez, explosive, powerful, boxes well. You know what I mean? Guy like him, I think with Teofimo, the only issue that I would think that he would have with Matias is, obviously his stamina. You know what I mean? If he can't hurt Matias or get him out of here, he's gonna have a long night, just like the rest of them. Same thing with Regis Prograis. These guys better boxers than Ergashev, but again, if you can't keep distance, which Prograis is not the greatest at doing, he might fall into this problem if he were to fight him in the future. I know he's fighting Devin Haney next week. But then you got the good boxers, right? You got the good boxers where, that a lot of boxers that are good, like Hitchens or Devin Haney or who else is there? Sandor Martin, you know what I mean? These guys are all good, but we know that with pressure, they bust pipes. And if you can't hurt them and you get tired of moving, yes, Richardson Hitchens, I think is phenomenal when it comes to controlling distance, defense, and all. I think he's the best at doing that at that division. He has the height, he has the reach, he's a safety first fighter. So against Matias, I think he would do well. But what happens when a guy doesn't respect your power and he keeps coming and coming and coming and you're winning, you're going up, you're 5 rounds up, 6 rounds up, and this guy starts to turn it up. And this guy is quick at closing distance. You know what I mean? He's better than most of these pressure fighters. He's good at that. What happens later? Again, good fights to be made. This division is loaded with people. You got all the guys moving up for 135 recently, like Teo and now Devin Haney, and you got all the guys that's been there at the same time. You got Arnold Barbosa, you got Gary Antoine Russell, which is a realistic fight because they're both Showtime or PBC or whatever. And, depending on where they go next or what happens with them next, that fight can be made. You know what I mean? And that would be a good fight, because Gary is a pressure fighter too, but he's not as intelligent as Matias. I think Matias does it better. I think Matias does it better. But Gary is explosive and he has power. So he's a pressure fighter, but he's powerful and he's a little bit more athletic than Ergashev. You know what I mean? So, but I would be leaning towards Matias for that. And then you got the older guys, Jose Ramirez, who I don't think would take this fight right now. But, Ramirez would probably fight for a title again, but he would probably go for a fighter that's more realistic for him to beat, you know what I mean, stylistically. You got Ryan Garcia there, but he's not going to fight this guy. Let's be honest. And you got other guys out there. Someone told me the other day on the chat that Elvis Rodriguez has been calling him out. I do not think that is a smart fighter for Elvis. I've been watching Elvis, all these years of him being a prospect while he was top ranked. I don't think that would be a good fight for him. It's not a bad fight, but I just don't think that Elvis should engage in that kind of fight right now. You know what I mean? I think he's still improving. I mean, he's not a prospect anymore. We can't baby him forever. But I think that is a step down in the direction that Matias is trying to go. I think Matias is at the point where he can face and possibly beat anyone. I think the only guys he loses to is the guys that can outbox him and have the stamina to deal with him for 12 rounds, or someone that has the power that's a boxer puncher like a T.O. or Regis Prograis. One or the other. All right. But he's good, man. He's good. And he's smart. And he's getting better. He's getting better. I like the little bit of improvements that I see with every fight. All right. All right, let's getting down to the middle. To the end, closer to the end here. Let's talk about Jermall Charlo against Jose Benavidez Jr. First off, just want to congratulate Jermall Charlo. I want to congratulate them both, and I'll tell you why. I want to congratulate Jermall Charlo for actually just getting back in the ring and looking close to himself. Okay. I don't think Jermall has looked phenomenal at 160. I've said this plenty of time. I know people are going, and I read your comments, and I know people feel like he's way off from what he used to be. And like, no, Jermall hasn't looked that great at the division. He hasn't. I think he looked phenomenal against Derevyanchenko. Okay, I think he looked phenomenal there. But I'm just gonna pull up his resume real quick, because I don't want to miss out on anybody. But he looked phenomenal against Derevyanchenko, and I think he looked better against him than anybody else did. But when you look at his last fight, that was 2.5 years ago against Montiel, didn't look great there. Dennis Hogan, it was all right, but Hogan really didn't have anything to prove. There was nothing there. He stopped him pretty easily. Brandon Adams, he didn't look great against Brandon Adams. Didn't look great against Matt Corbo. Some of you even said that they think he lost. All right. These are fights where it's like, outside of the Derevyanchenko fight, there's not much there. Jermall, he's a fighter. He's not an overly technical fighter. He's not a great defender. You know what I mean? He can counter well. He could put his punches together well. He has some good angles. He shows signs of brilliance, but he's not consistent with it. Sometimes you can see him doing some tough catch and shoots, and he'll hit you with some good angles at times, but he's not consistent with it, and he does get hit a lot. But congratulations to him for just picking up a win and being back in the ring, and showing that power and showing the combinations and giving us a pretty good fight. I mean, it wasn't a bad fight. But I also want to shout out Jose Benavidez, because this is the first fight that I can say that he tried to win. He didn't just taunt and talk like he did against Bud Crawford. And Crawford, the excuse was his leg, he had got shot, so he was limited because of the leg. But he did Crawford some issues because he's a good counterpuncher. And I've said this. And then Danny Garcia, same thing. It's like, all right, you land some good counters, but you're not doing anything to win. You're not taking it to the next level. You're doing enough to look impressive. And I think he was just trying to prove in those fights that he actually just belonged up there with the upper tier fighters and not try to really win. In this fight here, I like his aggression. I like the fact that he was coming forward most of the fight. He would definitely, there was moments of the fight where he just unloaded on Charlo while Charlo enforced Charlo against the ropes. Charlo's a bigger fighter, but I like the fact that he was being aggressive. You know what I mean? Jose, just at the end, Jose just didn't have the size and the power to really hurt Jermall, but he did land it and had put contact on Jermall throughout that fight. So I have to give him a lot of credit for that, for showing up. But Jermall, again, he was rusty. He was a little rusty, you know what I mean? But I'm starting to begin to question his power. Okay, I think the power was big at 154. I think the power was respectable at 160. But at 168, I have to question how much of a puncher he is. You know, I have to question that because you know, he clearly had the power at 154. He was a big 154 fighter. You know, but I have to question where it's at up here because he unloaded on Jose. I mean, he hit Jose with bombs, combinations, and he wasn't able to knock him down, you know, or stop Jose from coming forward. You know, he would back him up a little bit, you know, and he would come forward again. You know what I mean? And I expected, I didn't expect a knockout. I didn't know what to really expect in this fight. You know, I just said that Jamal's gonna take the win. But as I'm watching the fight, I'm thinking, you know, Jamal should be able to get a stoppage here, you know, because he's landing the right punches. It's just not hurting Jose like that. You know what I mean? So if he is gonna stay at the division at 168, these guys are tougher at 168, man. Whether he fights Plant, Andrade, Benavidez, Canelo, whoever, it's not going to be any easier at 168. You know what I mean? Like, these guys are more durable. You know, they've been at the division longer. And, you know, his power is a key factor. One thing he hasn't lost touch with is that jab, though. The jab is still phenomenal. He's always on point with the jab. You know, I think he could have won this fight with his jab alone. But when it comes to the power shots, you know, I just think that as he moves up, the power is not carrying up like the way it should. You know what I mean? You know, I mean, as far as Jose, I think Jose is going to be a top journeyman, you know, for anybody. You know, I think Jose is better off going down to at least 160. I don't think he belongs at above 160. You know, I think he should really be at 154, cut down in the weight. And I think 154 is there for big fights. Go back down to 154. You got, you know, and especially 154 is a PBC division. It's a PBC ran division. You know, there's talent, there's new talent there that I think he could give us some good fights. You know what I mean? You never know. I mean, with that performance, you never know. You know, if he actually tries to be the aggressor, might pull off a win against some of these guys. All right, but I don't think he belongs at. I mean, 160, even 160, I don't think he belongs there. You know what I mean? I think he should be back down at 154. All right, and as far as Jamal, I'm still not ready for him. You know, everybody's saying he's gonna fight Canelo in May. I really hope not. You know, I don't think that performance warrants a fight against Canelo. I know Canelo and his fans are gonna be fine with whatever he does. And I know we all like to say that Canelo could do whatever he wants. I mean, he can based on what he's done in his career. But he still has a responsibility as an undisputed champion, you know. And when you're holding on 4 titles, I think he should be fighting the best. And I think Jamal Charlo has not proven that he's the best at 168, you know. That's if he stays at 168. You know, if he doesn't and he goes back to 160 to defend his titles, which he really should do, you know, because the WBC did you a huge solid by letting you keep your belt throughout all that inactivity. And, you know, you got guys like Carlos Adames, who's the interim champ. You got guys like Janovic, who is unified now. I know Triple G is not going to fight you and stuff like that. And if Canelo doesn't fight you, you still have there's some fights out there that you should get yourself involved in. If you know, you should go back to 160. You know, get in shape. You were overweight for this. You know, I think with a longer camp, he should be in better boxing shape. Stay in the gym. You know, stay in shape. Stay fit. And stay ready. So you don't have to get ready. You know what I mean? You don't have to get ready in the next fight. You know what I mean? You could be ready before camp. You know what I mean? Just stay in shape. Defend that title at 160. And then move up. You know? And I still would love to see the Plant fight. I would love to see the Demetrius Andrade fight. You know, Plant and Andrade are both coming off losses to Benavidez now. So fight one of them. You know, the fights are still meaningful. Um, that's if you're gonna stay at, you know, if you're gonna do 168. If not, you know, I think the very least at 168, fight Anthony Durrell. You know, it's a better tune-up. It's a realer fight than the Jose Benavidez one. Or go back to 160 and defend that title that you've been holding on for almost 3 years. All right, I think that's the right thing to do. You know, because let's not don't vacate it and get stripped after they held the belt up for 3 years with no active fights. All right. And that's that. Overall, good performance. You know, I don't think he's the same, but I don't think he's that far from it. I just think overall, I don't think he has been great at 160. You know what I mean? There's been one phenomenal performance at 160 for me, and that was against Deverenchenko. And sometimes that's based on a matchup, you know, because Deverenchenko is there to fight. So he's bringing a fight to you. You bringing a fight back to him. You matching his injury. He's matching yours. But some of the other fights, like the Matias fight, didn't look so good. All right. So anyway, that's it for Jamal. That's all I really got to say. You know, congrats of him being back. All right. So let's move on to the final topic of the day. Final topic of the day. The main event: Demetrius Andrade against David Benavidez. Man, slaughter, man. Fight was good. Those first 4 rounds, you know, but Benavidez caught a mean one in the 4th round, right at the end of the round. Big overhand right. Andre tried to block it and got clipped because he just had his hands too low. Didn't catch it in time. And it caught him like right. I mean, it hit him so hard. His whole eye almost flew out his head. Yo. And he was never recovered, to me, in my opinion, from that punch. You know, never really recovered. But, you know, it didn't really matter because David it's just, again, with the flaws, the number of flaws. And I'm going to always talk about his flaws. You know, I see David in a press conference, and I'm sure he's talking about the YouTubers, you know, the people that do breakdowns like myself and film study like boxing gyms and stuff. You know, everybody talks about his you know, his feet and positioning and squaring up and all of this stuff. At the end of the day, you know, just like Wilder, they know how to make it work against better boxers. You know what I mean? And David Benavidez is improving with his style. You know, I saw the improvements in the Plant fight, and I saw him again with this fight. You know, he's getting better at his non-technical style because he's big. He has the volume to do it. You know, he has the speed and the power to do it. And it doesn't matter if you're a good boxer or a good defender. It's going to be too much. It's going to be too much for you to deal with at some point. So even if you have success early like Andrade did or even Caleb Plant did better than Andrade in those first 4 or 5 rounds. The first 6 rounds or so. You know what I mean? Andrade didn't do better. You know, Andrade. I think Andrade did what I thought he should do and not come out so quickly. You know what I mean? I gave Andrade the first and the third. And I gave Benavidez the second and the fourth. And I gave Benavidez everything after that. Andrade didn't come out blazing fast. He boxed. But it was just too much. You know, Andrade's taking jabs. Andrade's getting hit. You know, he doesn't have the defense that Plant had. But I figured he would make up with it with his offense. And then the fact that he likes to let his hands go. But, you know, you're at 168 barely. You're barely there. You're 36 years old, almost 36 years old. And you're getting involved in a full-fledged pressure fighter as your first test. You know, a lot of people said the same thing about Bud Crawford, but people weren't giving credit for what Bud had did leading up to the Spence fight. Even though Spence was on paper the biggest challenge. Crawford had the experience and the skills to know how to deal with a pressure fighter, high volume puncher. David is just too much of a beast, and this is why I've been leaning towards him beating Canelo. I know a lot of y'all don't agree with that. I don't care. It's about the styles, and I just think if Canelo can't hurt him to the body, Benavidez will beat him too, because Canelo is going to slow down, and Benavidez is going to keep coming. All right, and he's gonna beat him. Benavidez is better to at 168 than Callum Smith, Saunders, Plant. He's better than these guys. He just, unfortunately for him, he just didn't have a title at the time. Smith was drained. Smith is even bigger than David Benavidez. Callum Smith was too big. He had no business still fighting at 168, and he's stiff. He's a big, stiff guy. You know what I mean? He was backing up the entire fight. Benavidez is not going to do that. If Canelo can find a way to back Benavidez up, then he has a chance. If he can hurt him to the body, he has a good shot. But if he slows down, like he's known to do at this point, getting older, being smaller. Being smaller hasn't been a factor because he's been so much better than the fighters that he's fought, which is cool. Give him a lot of props for that. But at some point, this guy's a monster, man. He's a monster, and when you slow down, he picks it up, and that's why I am leaning towards Benavidez, and I hope the fight happens. I hope it happens now, man. Please don't give us Jamal Charlo. I know he has a 3-fight deal with PBC. Make those Benavidez fights 1 and 2. Do it on the first Mexican holiday in May and do it for the second one in September. Do it. Win or lose. Let's get his 2 fights. Unless, obviously if Canelo dominates him in the first fight, then we won't need to see a rematch. But if Benavidez wins, then let's get the rematch. If it's Canelo time to take an L and ride off to the sunset, it's his time. Or he could be the first to defeat this guy. And Benavidez can go on and have a good career, beating other good fighters, eventually moving up to light heavy. And Canelo can have another name on his resume. It's a win for both. It's a win. All right, but as far as Demetrius Andrade, look, man, and I've read your comments. Some of you guys just want this guy to disappear because he took a loss. He took a loss. I know he didn't fight nobody for years. I know he didn't fight any champions. I know he's picked up titles, but he hasn't fought champions. I know he didn't fight a lot of people. I know some of those fights were his fault. I get that. We've been through it. Just because he lost the fight doesn't mean he needs to retire. Doesn't mean he needs to disappear. He lost the fight to who I believe is the top contender at 168. All right? There's no shame in that loss. All right. It doesn't mean that he can't beat Caleb Plant. It doesn't mean that he can't beat Jamal Charlo or whoever else is at this division. All right. John Ryder, whatever. The man shouldn't just have to disappear just because he lost this fight. He lost to Benavidez. If Benavidez fights Canelo next, right, and Canelo loses to him, would it be a bad loss for Andrade? No, it wouldn't. So yes, he got dominated. He got destroyed. Cool. I know a lot of people wanted him to win. A lot of people predicted Andrade to win. I follow some of those channels that did that. It doesn't matter. It's just a pick. It's just a fight. He lost the fight. Shouldn't be angry unless you lost money. If you didn't lose money, then what are you so upset for? I still want to see Andrade fights. I am a fan of Andrade. I wanted him to win. Of course I wanted him to win. Been watching him I didn't even know who David Benavidez was, and I was already watching Andrade. Years before I even heard of Benavidez. Years before I even had a channel. So some of us really like him. So I know some people have certain narratives and stuff like that. Cool. I'm not one of those people. I want to see Andrade back. If he decides to ride off to the sunset and retire and that's the end of his career, then that's him. But I want to see him fight Plant. I would like to see him fight any top fighter at 168. Because if he could come back and pick up a good win, like Michelle Rivera did the other night against Lipinets, coming off of a loss where he got knocked down. You know what I mean? Like, picked up a good win against Lipinets the other night, coming off of a loss. That's what real fighters do. And I want to see if Andrade is a real fighter. Let's see what else you can do. You lost to this guy, but this guy might be one of the best. So it's not. It may not. It's not a bad loss to me. Did I expect more from Andrade? Yes. I didn't think it would be this long, this short. You know, I know he quit on his stool, but he was getting his ass kicked. He was getting beat up, man. He's getting beat up pretty bad. And he's not Plant. He don't have the defense. He's not on that level. There was nothing left for him. He was getting tired and he was getting beat up. It is what it is. It's all good. People saying, oh, he did better. All these other fighters did better. Well, a lot of fighters did better than Spence too. Doesn't mean they're better than Spence. It's just that when it's time to show up for a fight, you show up at your best when you fight the best. And that's what David did in 2 fights in a row. He fought Plant, didn't stop Plant, but beat him up pretty bad. Then he destroyed Andrade. Doesn't mean that all those other fighters that Benavidez fought, that gave him issues, it doesn't mean that those guys are better than the fighters. Like, it doesn't mean that everybody that Bud beat is better than Errol Spence, because some of them did better. That's not... It's the logic of boxer fans, man. You gotta just laugh, you know. And I read the comments. I just laugh at this point. I don't even react to most of them. But listen, man, great performance from David Benavidez. I expected more from Andrade, but I didn't get it. All right, but I couldn't pick up Andrade to win as much as I wanted him to win. It didn't make sense for him to win this fight, you know. Benavidez is too strong, too powerful to me, too fast, a real legitimate pressure fighter. You know what I mean? And he's taking care of himself a lot better. You know, he's looking better at the weigh-ins. He's making weight. You know, he's not getting into any trouble. He looks motivated. You know what I mean? I like him, man. It's a guy that I want him to win. And let me tell you something. If he doesn't beat Canelo, I didn't bring up David Morrell yet. Andrade could fight him too. I didn't bring up David Morrell, but David Benavidez would beat David Morrell, in my opinion. I don't think David Morrell does much better than Andrade. You know, I like David Morrell. And I wanted to see that fight when I heard it was going to be Benavidez and Morrell. But Benavidez beats him too. You know, Morrell is just in a similar situation but with Andrade, just much, much younger. You know what I mean? Powerful, explosive. But I've seen where his fights drag out, where he doesn't look all that. You know? I know he's a crazy good prospect, and he's one of the best ones out there. All right? But Benavidez is proven. You know what I mean? And Morrell, again, is very similar to Andrade. Comes out very, very fast. All right, very fast hitting, explosive, throws a lot of punches. You know what I mean? Can box well. What happens when you slow down, though? That's when Benavidez is on your ass, and Morrell loses to him too. So yes, I would like to see Morrell against Andrade, or Morrell against Plant, or Morrell against any of these other top fighters at 168. And for David, all I want to see is him and Canelo at this point. Nothing more. You know, but yo, if Canelo doesn't take the fight, let Benavidez go in there and fight Morrell right now. You heard it here first. I'll say it again when it's time, but I'm telling you now that David will beat Morrell right now. You know, Morrell, maybe with some time, maybe. You know, but right now, David Benavidez beats him. David is not like the guys he's been facing. You know what I mean? So anyway, that's my thoughts on that. All right. So anyway, that's the end of this. Please again subscribe to the channel. Shout out to all the new subscribers, man. Shout out to all the people that was here the other night. We got some breakdowns to do, man. And yeah, I'm out of here, man. You have a good night. Peace.